Howdy, Larkin and Amanda here, and I wanted to do a video entitled, I already forget what it's entitled, Philosophical Standing Armies, and I wasn't going to tell anybody why the heck it would be called such a thing. But, as you may have noticed, weird analogies often occur to me. So I'm going to start on something that has nothing to do with the topic of this. It's the other side of the analogy. Fans of history may know that the founding fathers and back at the beginning of this country, careful you don't kick the stand, were terrified of the idea of a standing army. Because they said, and they knew from history, if you have a standing army, if you have a government bunch of people whose profession it is to stand around ready to kill people and blow stuff up on behalf of the state, they're going to go make wars. And they much preferred just an armed citizenry and, yeah, a militia that could get together and fight if they wanted to, but obviously their first priority is, you know, if somebody's invading, go kick their butts and come back home and get back to normal life. They're not looking for conflict. They're not cruising around the world trying to start fights everywhere. They're normal people who understand that, yeah, we may have to get together and defend ourselves, but we don't want a group of professional soldiers sitting around going, where can we go soldier some stuff? And so they were rightfully terrified of standing armies. And then we had the Constitution, which created the biggest standing army in the history of the world. Whoops, that didn't work too well.
Whoopsie.
But I want to talk about something that's parallel to that, and it has to do with human nature. The reason they were concerned with standing armies is because they understood human nature, largely based on what history had already shown them. Because I see something very similar to that when it comes to the freedom movement. And there are so many organizations or political campaigns or individuals that turn into being about themselves. They stop being about any actual cause, or they stop being about victory, and they are about continuing the war. And I see this so much in a lot of ways. For example, and I've mentioned this before, there's like a bunch of think tanks that get, you know, tons of funding of millions of dollars to write these long treatises about Austrian economics. And I want to throw in, I'm glad they're there. I'm glad that stuff is being done. But so often these organizations and entities are just talking to themselves. They're not even trying to do outreach. They're not trying to get the rest of the world to understand these things. It's basically a club for people talking to themselves about how much they understand about economics. I wasn't planning on doing this, but I'm going to throw in a mention of Professor Walter Williams, who I was a big fan of for a very long time, including back when I was a statist and he used to fill in on Rush Limbaugh's show. And whenever he filled in, it was way better than when Rush was on. And he was so good at putting it in terms that anybody can understand, and I love that about him. He was an economist. He could have used the big fancy words that made people go, ooh, I don't know what he's talking about, but he sounds impressive. But he put it in terms to get it to the general public, and he filled in for Rush on his show because he wanted to get these ideas to everybody else. And I think there's a dividing line between the people who are about the fight and the people who actually want to win. And unfortunately, I think the number of people who would love nothing more than to see statism crumble and fall and be gone so they can get back to like having a life, they may be outnumbered by the people in the freedom movement who are about being in the fight, and they're about the, like...
But you sense that they wouldn't know what to do if, like, all of that went away. Like, if the state weren't a problem suddenly tomorrow, or, you know, there wasn't a reason to say I'm a voluntarist, or I'm a, you know, I believe in real liberty, and be talking to people about this. If there was no reason, a lot of us know exactly what we'd be doing, but you sense that these types of people we're talking about, it's like, you know, it becomes them, or it is them, and you sense that they're in love with the fighting for freedom, but they don't really want to do the things that are required to move things in that direction, which is just humbling yourself to talk to people and learning that you have to know human psychology and how to talk to people, because you know, it's, you know, as they say, it's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled. I forget who says that.
That was close.
But like,
Mark Twain, maybe.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where those are the real, you know, uncomfortable truth is moving the ball forward towards real liberty is having those uncomfortable conversations with your fellow man on the street every day, because it's a numbers game and it doesn't happen overnight, and people act on what they believe. So if people offer real services that compete with the government, if people organize around government, we're free, yada yada. But these other things Larkin is talking about, it's like, you know, you mentioned Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson's a great example of the LP just circle jerking with the LP. In other words, it's about campaigning and getting money and rubbing shoulders and congratulating ourselves, while one guy had, you know, I forget how much it was, $16 million or something like that to do what with.
I think it was that some huge amount.
It was a ridiculous amount, and it didn't actually move the, you know, ball towards actually the goal of freedom, and it didn't accomplish anything other than, well, we didn't get our clown on the throne, and even if the, you know, this is a good reminder that even if the Libertarian Party got somebody on the throne and goes, look, we reduced the size and scope of government, then that reinforces that we needed a guy to save us, to give us back our freedom. So even if they
process is the proper way to do things.
Right, it's a loss for liberty. It, again, does not move the ball forward. So.
But in his case, it's a glaring example, and, I should put the link below when Josie and I were invited to ask questions of the candidates for president for the Libertarian Party, and we did, and Gary Johnson admitted that the non-aggression principle goes over his head and he can't understand it. It's like
he literally said it made no sense to him. And that's somebody who was claiming to be libertarian.
But you can see that their focus is about the party. They're in the party to be in a party. They're doing political action to do political action. And the funny thing is, when I bash that, a bunch of people point to Ron Paul and go, yeah, look at that. Yeah, do look at that. Ron Paul was not about winning elections and winning people over and kissing people's butts and changing his message to get more approval.
And he made that clear, by the way.
Yeah, and he said that from the beginning of his political career to the end. I loved his closing remarks on the House floor right before he left, because he basically said politics and legislation and voting isn't the way to do anything. What matters is what people believe. And that's what he did the whole time. He focused on spreading the beliefs to the normal people. And you get so many organizations and stuff, like every political campaign turns into being about itself. Now it doesn't have to. There are a few examples of people who, like Ernie Hancock ages ago ran, and he knew it was a joke. It was just to spread the message. But as soon as somebody's like, maybe if I get enough votes, you already failed. You already made it about yourself and the political campaign and this endeavor instead of the idea. Because the moment you're going to fudge the idea in favor of something that serves your campaign, Kokesh, it becomes utterly pointless. And it's just about you, and it stops being about the idea. And the thing is, what's so frustrating to me is that there's a bunch of money to be raised by people who play the game that's been around forever and has no chance of success. So you see these think tanks, and people complain about, the Koch brothers throwing bazillions of dollars into these libertarian, quote unquote, sort of not really at all libertarian political things, and they don't do anything. It's sort of just this internal game of we're important and we're talking about these things and look how important we are and we have our organization or our campaign or something. And it's like, well, how much of your focus is on getting the rest of the world to change their mind? And usually it's almost none. Sometimes it's a little bit, and sometimes it's, well, we say that's our purpose and we can if if that happens to work, okay, but mostly we want campaign funds, and we want donations, and we want votes, and we want people thinking we're important, and we want people paying attention to our campaign and our promises for a legislative agenda that's going to blah, blah, blah. That's never about ideas. And the reason I called this, philosophical standing armies, is the same mentality. If you have a group of people who are about having a political movement, which is why I refer to what I do as anti-political. If you're about a political movement, it becomes about politics. And you can raise lots of money that way. and you can distort the message and mangle it into something unidentifiable like the Libertarian Party did. But it's to be avoided for the same reason that standing armies are to be avoided, because it necessarily pushes people in the direction of being about themselves. They become about their own organization and their own campaign.
Well, and also like this whole, you know, when people talk about circle jerking, I think that just means like they're like empowering themselves to essentially accomplish nothing. It's just they're passing their own money around amongst themselves, but they aren't actually doing anything with it. Like one of the things that I love about just the practical stuff that does move the message forward is it's the obvious stuff that always makes sense. You know, it's you know, going around the state, it's taking more and more of your life and moving it away from the state's hands and trading and bartering with your fellow man around that stuff, and then spreading the philosophical message while you do it and asking people questions that make them think, and, you know, having events that encourage spreading the ideas but arming people with how to spread the ideas, and then coming up with alternative services to what government claims to offer as services. All this stuff is stuff that actually moves the ball towards liberty, and it's the stuff we already do in day-to-day life. We just need to do it while we talk about it and what it means.
Yeah, you made me think of another thing I wanted to say to offend a bunch of people.
You're so good at that.
In the freedom movement, there are also a bunch of people who are all about cryptos and all about investing in this and that and the other thing. A bunch of those people are pro-freedom, and they're about spreading the message and empowering people who want freedom. Excellent, cool. But a bunch of them kind of don't do that anymore. They forget about that, and it's just about, I can play this game and make myself rich. Which, okay, you have every right to play whatever game and make yourself rich. I mean, as long as the game isn't like fraud or coercion, you have every right to do that. But when it turns into that, and I know people have a pet peeve about the crypto crowd that's just in it like it's like they're stock market traders. Like, if we play this and we play that and we make money, and they forget that if the world doesn't have freedom, you don't have freedom. Like, you can be rich in an unfree world, and you can do a whole bunch more stuff, and you can watch other people suffering and being oppressed, but there isn't such thing as you get a free world while nobody else does. That's not how freedom works.
Or, you know, you have to have all the cryptocurrencies that you could potentially make money on, or they could be a temporary store of value, or they could be something to trade in. Obviously, they're all going to die out if they don't have some sort of use case, and people aren't, you know, making a use of it for something, or trading with it, or buying and selling it for some reason. So you have to actually have more of an adoption of a currency for it to actually be a tool that frees more and more people. So it's like the same concept. If people are just, oh, this is so cool, and they're not doing any actual outreach to try to get out there and spread what they're using, or that tool or that idea, then it's like, okay, well then you might as well, like, what are you doing it for? Okay, well then you have to look at what the motivation is for. It's not for actually spreading the idea, and that goes back to talking about their motivation. They don't really want a free world, in the sense of they want
to be winners in an unfree world.
They want to be, their identity is in the activism. That's it, really. It's like but they're not even doing the activism. Their identity is in, I want to be the person that seems to be like I'm fighting for freedom, and it's like.
And to be clear, I'm all in favor of people like trying to prosper and make a bunch of money for themselves. Like, I'm not against that at all. I suck at that myself. I'm all in favor of people doing that. So I'm not complaining about the people doing it. If it's complaining about anything, it's complaining about part of the movement pretending it's about freedom, and it's about playing games so that those particular people have more money. And I'm talking about the people who sort of forget about everything else. And crypto is an amazingly useful tool for freedom. If you have people combining the ability to trade and, you know, as anonymously as possible, and in a way government can't steal it, and they have the mentality of free people that they're not obligated to bow to the state, that's awesome. But if you don't have that mentality, the tool is kind of worthless. It's the same thing with guns. Like, look how many conservatives are like, yeah, you'll never take it from me, but I'm going to go pay my taxes and obey the law. Well, then nobody needs to take it from you. You're not going to resist. You have the mentality of a slave, and you're allowed to have a gun. Whoop-de-doo. You're not going to use it against your oppressors because you're voluntarily going
in other
along
words,
with what
if you're
your
still
press
going
is
to do
saying.
as you're told, even if you have all the tools to free yourself right there in front of you, and people prove this all the time, a bunch of the world is not necessarily mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, whatever, free, but arguably they possess all the tools at their disposal to actually have that. They just underestimate, the ability to use those tools, and that they can actually do that. And so the thing is it does all come from the belief. It comes from the mindset of people. And
I would much rather have, like, if we started with 1 million people who understood voluntarism and they were all like poor and stuff, there's a way better chance than 1 million people who were rich on cryptos but were still statists. Like, they may do well themselves, but that doesn't change the world. And I think we have to, I know it's really frustrating to talk to statists. I've been doing it for a quarter of a century. And it's annoying, and it's easier and it's more fun to, like, go hang out with a bunch of anarchists and, talk about how dumb the rest of the world is and all that. But they are the world. All the statists out there, they make up most of the world. If they don't change, you're stuck in a statist world. So if your approach isn't at all about outreach, like, by all means, make yourself money, make yourself rich and prosper and whatever. But if your goal is to have a free world, you have to get the ideas to other people. There's no trick you can do with crypto or guns or anything else that's going to make up for the fact that most of the world is statist.
Because it's about what people believe. And we've seen that. We've seen more of how much it matters what people believe, I think, in 2020 than any other year.
Yeah.
Because, like, look at 2020. Like, people, I found out the hard way this year that a lot of people don't understand how health works. They think doing this for, like, extended periods of time is a perfectly good idea and actually great for their health with a cloth. And more people than I thought think that way, and more people than I thought think that Western medicine is perfectly trustworthy.
Well, they they believe the experts, which is sort of a separate thing.
But it's just it just goes to show, like, all these people have the internet. They have literally the universe of all kinds of knowledge in their hand. All these first world people, and yet look at how many of them are, like, cowing immediately, believe the status quo, this is actually a thing, be afraid of the COVID.
Right.
They're doing all that, again, because the belief freaking matters. They have the tools to be financially independent, to communicate with the whole globe, to figure out real freedom.
Right.
And they haven't yet.
Yeah, because the mentality is the problem. And there are a whole bunch of people waking up and seeing it, which reminds me we have to do our other video called Why the Hell Are We So Optimistic? Because there are a bunch of people seeing through it, but that depends upon their view of reality and society and authority and all that stuff. And if we don't focus on that, we don't fix the world. And the people are like, we need a revolution. Like, if the people are statists, what the hell do you think that's going to accomplish? Or, we need a civil war. We need to get Trump back in there. Like, holy crap. Like, first of all, the people who are saying that are already complete statists. You can't overthrow an idea with bullets, like V for Vendetta. Ideas are bulletproof. That is true of good ideas and crappy ideas, including statism. Having a revolution would accomplish nothing. The revolution that matters is the revolution of ideas. And unfortunately, it's so easy, especially for dollar bills, to distract people from focusing on actually changing the mentality of the world.
Yep.
And, oh, well, if there's this political thing over there, I can just vote for them, and then it's up to them. I don't have to do anything, or I'll donate to that. Or if I run for office, somebody might give me money, and then if I go schmooze and kiss people's butts, they might give me more money, and then I can be in a political party, and then we can try to get on the ballot, and shut up, you're not doing any good. And to watch so much of the time and energy and money of people being thrown into standing armies that are about the fight instead of about victory is frustrating. And at the end of the day, again, I love the fact that there are, very in-depth studies of economics and explanations of, like, law without the state. Like, it's great that those are there. I'm not saying I don't want those to be there. I'm saying those don't really do anything if nobody ever reads them or watches them or understands them. There has to be the outreach to get people started in that direction, so the people who are curious actually go find that stuff and learn about it.
An example of this is all of the voluntarist / anarchist / freedom related literature that's been right there throughout history.
Yeah.
That people, people ask.
Centuries.
people ask you, where do you find that stuff? And you're like, okay, well, go read Lysander Spooner, go read Rose Wilder Lane, go read these people that, like, Rose Wilder Lane published The Discovery of Freedom in 1943, so not even that long ago. And then, you know, go watch the documentary Sophie Scholl, The Final Days, and look up the documents about that. And just, this stuff has been said, and it's been put out there, but it hasn't been put out there in a digestible format that the average person even reads or understands. Like, back then, reading was privileged amongst a lot of the population, and not that many people, there wasn't a way to mass market. You didn't have the internet. You can just mass market a book and have it get out there. So look at what made the difference. Well, outreach. Well, the internet comes into the world, and now it's like people have the internet, which is, you know, person A can talk to person B on the other side of the globe and pretty much instantaneously communicate an idea. And there you go. People can reach out and go and talk about things and bring stuff to light. Now these ideas are starting to actually have, you know, basically paths outward and to growth.
And just to guilt trip people a little bit, if you're one of the people, and I totally relate and sympathize, who's saying like, I can't stand all the people out there wearing masks and believing this thing, and cheering for shutdowns and this and that and the other thing, I'm just going to hide from all of them inside my house. Why would you think they're ever going to change their thought patterns and their behaviors if the people who know better don't bother to try to give them the ideas and the information? You're literally intentionally isolating yourself so that they are never exposed to a possibility other than blind obedience and belief in the state. They are the ones you need to go talk to. And that's why, like, everything I've done for the last quarter of a century has been about outreach. I kind of hate that term, but it describes it. Including our Candles in the Dark thing, which is about how to talk to people so it doesn't turn into a fight and an argument and everything.
In fact, you don't even have to interject with your own values and opinions and ethics and all that. The Candles in the Dark approach is basically Socratic, but with certain lines of questions that just lead people to what they really think. You ask them what they think, and eventually you're going to find that somewhere in there their beliefs contradict themselves. So you're not in the ring, and that's what we do. You know, there's ways to do that, and this is the stuff that changes people because we watch it happen right in front of us. We watch people go, "Oh, I've never had to look at that in my head before."
But one of the most important things about it is that it isn't just nice and gentle for them, for the statist you're talking to. It's nice and gentle for you, because the reason so many voluntarists are like, the rest of the world is hopeless, they're all indoctrinated idiots, I'm going to go hide over here and never talk to anybody ever again, is because it's so uncomfortable to be in those stupid arguments with somebody whose belief system is idiotic and counter to their own interests, much less everybody else's. And so if your experience of trying to get the rest of the world to wake up is confrontational and frustrating and everyone seems like idiots, you're going to stop doing it, and it's not going to be any fun.
Then there's all the people that are socially awkward and don't even know how to communicate with people. So
but it even makes it easier for them, because if basically, you know, it's like a battlefield. If you go, the other side's too dumb, I'm just going to leave, okay, then you lose. Only Candles in the Dark and lots of other things make it so the battlefield isn't about shooting people. It's about walking over there and talking to them and finding out they're not too dumb to understand voluntarism. If you think that the world is too stupid to understand, don't attack people, you're absolutely wrong. They are too indoctrinated. They are not too stupid. They're not too immoral. They're not too short-sighted. It's none of those things.
I would point out that there's hundreds of thousands more voluntarists in the world than there was a decade ago, and that's because talking to people works.
Yeah. And if you look at people and ask them, ask voluntarists, well, what started you on your journey? It's often some dumb little thing. I don't know any of them said, well, I sat through a 3-hour lecture on Austrian economics out of the blue for no stinking reason, and now I'm an anarchist. People will get into that when other things start them down the trail, and I talked about this recently in a video, but there needs to be a thing that starts them thinking about it, and often that can be the dumbest little discussion or a stupid little video, I made the tiny dot and I'm allowed to rob you, which are two just stupidly simple videos, but they made people go, because they were targeted at all the people who've never heard of this stuff and never thought about this stuff. And if we're not targeting them, if we close ourselves in our little echo chamber and have our, you know, political committees and try to raise funds to have this person run for office, the rest of the world doesn't care. And we need them to care. That's the thing that, like, you can complain all you want about how stupid the world is. If the stupid world remains statist, you remain enslaved. Because if the vast majority of people still believe and worship the volcano god, they're going to throw you in it. You need them to not believe in it, so you need to do what you can to make them not believe in it so they don't throw you into the volcano.
It's worth pointing out, too, that if you communicate to the world, I don't want to talk to any of you because you're all, you have this demeaning attitude to them, like you're all brainwashed sheep. But you put off this, I don't want to talk to you wall, and you don't say anything because you've decided that, you're the only one who can wake up to this, but no one else will ever see it. Then you're also inadvertently communicating by omission. You're communicating to the rest of the statist world, necessarily so. My ideas are not worth sharing. They're definitely not even worth making myself a little bit uncomfortable for. And they're not worth telling my fellow man about or screaming it from the rooftops about or trying to put up signs about or trying to have conversations about. It's not worth any of that. Meanwhile, they're being bombarded every day with, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this, consumerism, left, right, and center every day of the week, every week of the year. And everyone's trying to convince them that their product or their service is the greatest thing ever that's going to change your life and be so amazing. And so our subconscious brain, our conscious brain doesn't care what really is going on. Our subconscious brain is this mastermind back here. It's consciously doing its own thing, but in the background, and what it's telling us all the time is, here's what's really important based on what people in the world around you are communicating is important. Here's what we're getting is important from people. Guess what statists get from you what's important? Not communicating about freedom. They don't think that's important. What they think might be important is running away and hiding and going off grid, and maybe they think acting weird is important for you because they see you as a weird conspiracy theorist, but they're not going to think that communicating freedom to them is what's important because you don't act like it. Yeah. You act like it's something not to be talked about.
Yeah, and if 99% of the world is your enemy and wants you enslaved, you're kind of in trouble, and it doesn't matter how enlightened you are. Living in a world like that's going to suck. And if you can be self-sufficient and hide in the woods, okay, doesn't that kind of suck compared to the idea of being surrounded by people who accept and respect your self-ownership? And we only get there if those of us who understand that go out of our way to spread that to other people. Anyway, so we've been babbling about that for a while. But yeah, and beware of movements and political campaigns and this and that and the other thing that just become about themselves. Like, the focus has to be on the people who don't know what you know and who don't believe what you believe and who are currently indoctrinated and duped. If your focus isn't about changing them, what do you think you're going to accomplish? You can put, 100 anarchists in a room and have them talk to each other. If that's all that happens, okay, they were already anarchists, they're still anarchists, and the rest of the world is still statist.
And I know there's going to be people that bring this up, so I'm just going to bring it up now so we've already thought about that. But that is that as far as moving the ball towards freedom, while you are doing the work to just talk to people, have difficult conversations, try to spread the message of freedom and get people to think differently, there are also ways to be tactically, defensively, or offensively fighting back against the actual control freaks who are constantly overstepping in people's lives. So, for example, Larkin and I absolutely, we have the Candles in the Dark thing, and we have, outreach via events that we've done and talks and things like that we've done, and we'll just go hang out at somebody's house party or whatever and talk to people there that we've, never introduced to these ideas. And that's something that we do while Larkin is also writing the 42 USC 1983 lawsuit template, but that's to get the 42 USC 1983 lawsuit concept out to a bunch of the businesses that were harmed by these governors. Governors, mayors, police can be personally sued and held accountable under 42 USC 1983. Create a deterrent to this in the future. Perfect tactical, actual defensive and offensive response to make control freaks who are trying to use their statism against you back off while also spreading the ideas. So you can be moving the ball towards freedom in multiple ways. I didn't want to discount
And none of this is like about
legal tactics.
Yeah, none of this is about criticizing people who are actively trying to resist in whatever way, whether it's I'm going to hunker down with my machine gun or I'm going to use cryptos and stuff.
Any resistance is good resistance.
Like, if you're in a battle and there's 3 of you and a bazillion of them, wouldn't it be nice if you could make it that there were a bazillion of you and 3 of them? Because then the battle ends. And that's where the ultimate focus needs to be. In addition to whatever you do to try to prosper and be as free as you can in the meantime and stuff, it's like I've said 80 bazillion times, it's a numbers game. And I'll just end on that because that is what matters. Whether you like it or not, whether it's comfortable or not, whether it's annoying or not to have to go, oh, I have to go out there and talk to more statists who are so indoctrinated, it's so frustrating. Yeah, you do, and I do too, and we all do. And if we don't fix that, nothing is going to make this a free society. If you have 100 slaves and only one of them thinks slavery is wrong, you're going to keep having 100 slaves. One might escape, and then you'll have 99 slaves. It has to be about mentality. It can't be about, this organization or this political campaign. It has to be about all the people that you probably don't particularly want to talk to, because right now they have no idea about any of this.
If you're impatient because you think, not enough people woke up fast enough, and you've only been alive as long as you've been alive, which is any human being. I don't care how long you've been alive. The longest human lifespan, I don't care if you're 126 years old. Look at history. Actually learn about history and how far the ideas of actual individual freedom are and how far they've come in context, how new this is.
Yeah.
And then when the internet came to the timeline, which, keep in mind, before that meant all flow of information was heavily controlled and or just naturally stifled by geographic location. So consider all those things and remember that freedom and liberty are the furthest they have come in the timeline, and moving faster exponentially than ever before. And maybe don't be so freaking impatient, and don't expect to see the state completely dissolve in your lifetime either.
Right.
It may or may not happen, but if there's ever been a chance in history for it to happen,
in places.
Well, believe it or not, with the internet, if you actually know math and you know exponential reach, with the internet, for the first time in history, it's possible that some of us within our lifetimes might see a significant amount of government control just fall apart.
And that is where we should pause, because that's a perfect segue into the next video we're gonna make.
We'll make you wait for the other one.
Instead of being bummed out and frustrated, go do what you can to change the rest of the world.
Yes. And then stay tuned for our video, Why the Hell Are We So Optimistic?
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Fare thee well.